Now, there's been a lot of discussion about whether we have a two-tier policing system in the UK, but we also need to look at whether we have a two-tier justice system. David Spring, a 61-year-old retired train driver, was jailed for 18 months for making threatening gestures to police and chanting "Who the F is Allah" during an anti-immigration protest on Whitehall on the 31st of July, one that I was at and was momentarily arrested myself at that as a journalist. Now, crude as such a slogan may be, it is not an illegal thing to say, and there is no suggestion that Mr. Spring himself was actually violent. Nevertheless, the judge chose not to suspend his sentence and instead sent him straight to jail. But Whitehall has seen many crude statements and actions in recent months. In October last year, a Muslim man was filmed screaming "God's curse be upon the infidels" while waving a jihadist flag around. There was no charge or arrest, let alone a jail sentence for that incident. And in February, another incident that I was attendant at, I actually filmed this on your screens now, the genocidal slogan "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free" was projected onto Parliament, as you can see there on the tower of Westminster Big Ben. No charge, no arrest, no sentence, no drama. That one, it seems, was permissible. And there are many, many more incidents like this. Now, remember the lad who set fire to the cenotaph during the Black Lives Matter riots in June 2020. No jail for him either. Just a £340 fine, a slap on the wrist, a simple matter of court costs. No porridge for that young man. Now, David Spring was, of course, not the only anti-immigration protester jailed without being actually violent. A judge described Gary Harkness, 59, as being the least involved with rioting of anyone that he had encountered. Mr. Harkness was said to have made lewd gestures and have been heard swearing, but did not hit anyone, throw anything, or spit at anyone. Yet despite all of that, he was jailed for 1 year. Now, compare the case of Mr. Harkness to that of the Convoy for Palestine from 2021. A group of men drove 200 miles from Bradford to a Jewish community in North London and yelled "F the Jews, F all of them, F their mothers, F their daughters." You've guessed it, all charges were dropped. Not a dicky bird. Now, the jailing of the likes of Mr. Harkness and Mr. Spring also occur in a country which is extremely lenient to the likes of Mirza Mohammed Saeed, who last year pleaded guilty to sexually assaulting 7 women, but avoided jail and was allowed to attend his daughter's wedding in Pakistan. What about Youssef Gareth, 21, and Ahmed Al-Akbar, 25, asylum seekers who were spared jail and instead given community orders for attacking a man and stealing his Rolex watch? Now, Suleiman Maknudja in 2014 was convicted of 5 counts of sexual activity with a child. You've guessed it. He also was spared jail. So we've heard the accusations of two-tier policing, but is there also a case for two-tier justice? Well, that's the topic of tonight's conversation, and joining me now to discuss this in the studio is the barrister Jonathan Dean, KC, and also Stephen Barrett, barrister. So let's start with you, Stephen. We've heard there a very different set of roll calls with very, very different outcomes. Do you think, on the basis of this evidence, and particularly in events of the recent 2 weeks, we have a two-tiered justice system?
Well, so we are entitled to assume that the judges have taken all of the relevant information into account and done their job properly when they have sentenced these individuals. And we're not really, I don't think we're in a stage where we can criticise an individual judge. At the same time, what I think we can say is that in 2011, the last time that there were riots, the Court of Appeal, a little while later, did find that the judges in those instances got a bit carried away. And so there's every possibility that that may be happening. I think for your viewers, what is perhaps more important, what is perhaps more interesting, and what I consider a constitutional point, is what is going on with sentencing in this country. Because if you don't get sent to prison for an offence that lots of people consider serious, like the downloading of paedophilic images, and yet you do get sent to prison for things that people don't actually consider that serious, well, then sentencing has fallen out of alignment with public understanding. And I think that that's because sentencing has been really taken out of the public's purview. It's a political choice, how you sentence anybody for a crime. You know, whether you think murder is important or not important is your political choice. Whether you think rape is more important than murder or less important than murder, these are political choices. But to my mind, they used to be the purview of the people. The people used to be able to say, actually, do you know what? We think that's a very serious offence. And do you know what? We don't think that's a very serious offence. And because of the rise of things like the Sentencing Council, this attempt to put power outside the democratic process, leave it in the hands of experts, I do worry that the political choices are not being made by the people who are ultimately the arbiters of democracy, ultimately the arbiters of politics. And that will inevitably lead to a two-tier justice system because it won't reflect what they value and what they care about.
Mr. Dean, now most people in the industry, in the profession, are horrified at the notion that there could be politicisation of the judiciary. There can be different outcomes depending on your beliefs. But nevertheless, when we look at the evidence there, it does at least appear that that's what's happening. What's your take?
I think the criminal justice system is struggling very, very badly at the moment to keep up with the range of offences and the volume of offences. And it's very difficult for the police and judges to cope. But what I would say is, yes, I don't think it's two-tier, I think it's multiple-tier. I think some of the anti-Jewish incidents that you referred to in your introduction, and many of the incidents which have led to a maximum upsurge in anti-Semitism, are simply not being taken as seriously as other incidents of violence and crime. And I think that is a real concern. If I may just say on Stephen's point, with the greatest respect, I don't myself agree that the public ought to be the arbiters of sentencing. Sentencing is incredibly complex exercise, and I think it has to be left to the experts, although I do think, as I've said, that they're struggling under the weight of what's taking place at the moment, doing their best, but struggling.
Isn't the point, though, that the judiciary can only judge what's put in front of them? And in particular, those two incidents there where I was handcuffed at the Whitehall protest, it was a enough is enough, a patriot protest, if you like. I was released quickly when they found out I was a journalist. It would have been a bad story for them. Maybe there was two-tier policing there and I was the beneficiary of that. But also at the previous one, where I was literally imploring police officers to arrest or at least make those men desist from projecting those images onto Big Ben, men in full face coverings. I was saying to coppers, go and nick those people. They didn't have the slightest inclination. Yeah. The fact of the matter is, these cases aren't even making the courts because the police aren't feeling the right collars.
No, and Jonathan makes a very good point that actually it's very likely the police officers are drowning in the amount of laws that we have. We certainly don't lack for laws on these issues. If it's true that we have, and we do have a law, I think it's Section 29B of the 1986 Act, which makes it illegal to spread hatred towards a religion, that has not been equally applied to every religion. It has not been. You know, we have watched instances where Jewish people have been maligned and put in fear, and nothing has been done. If we want to fix this, my suggestion is that you need to slim down the criminal justice system. You need to return clarity, reduce the number of individual offences, agree a broad, a system that works, that doesn't put too much pressure on people, and then apply it consistently to everyone. Because I'm only ever about the rule of law. I know I sometimes pilloried, sometimes people try and make my position something it isn't. All I want is clear rules, known in advance, applied consistently without fear or favour to everybody. That's what Robert Peel said would work, and Robert Peel was right. And I'm afraid the police have moved away from that. They've always had a bit of discretion, and probably in a system you need police officers to have discretion, but that discretion has become politicised. I don't believe an individual officer uses that discretion on an individual basis. I think those officers use that discretion on a political basis. I think the College of Policing tells them to, and whether any of this has benefited any of us is deeply unclear. I mean, it's just this division that it causes, the inequality, the unequal application of laws is inherently unjust. It will cause tensions and damage to to all of us. We are one community, one nation, and I think we need one set of rules that apply to us all.
And isn't that the problem here? During times of social unrest, we saw it after the 2011 riots in Tottenham. Sir Keir Starmer was in charge at that point too. The courts were open 24 hours. There was a clampdown then. There's a clampdown now. But I've been speaking to people who've been arrested. I've been speaking to people who've been the family members of those arrested. They're being told that they should plead guilty. Plead guilty to this, because if you plead non-guilty, you will be getting a custodial sentence. They've been terrified into taking a guilty verdict. That ticks the boxes. It satisfies the measures of looking like a clampdown. But what's the legacy that's left behind for the public looking on this? They feel that the law is being politicised and it's being weaponised.
Can I just correct one thing? It's Jeremy Dean, not Jonathan Dean.
Oh,
that's a small matter. Can I just, if I answer your point in just one moment, could I just say this? I think the point you made earlier about the police and calling for the police to arrest, I don't think the police have a clear understanding of what the law is. There are so many factual scenarios floating around at the moment. I think the vast majority of police officers, especially in London, actually don't have a clue as to whether an offence has been committed or not. For example, from the river to the sea, and so on and so forth. On your wider point, as a lifelong criminal practitioner, all I can say is that I don't believe that any criminal practitioner would encourage anyone to plead guilty to anything unless they genuinely believe that an offence had been committed. And that's my lifelong experience. However, these matters are being politicised. Keir Starmer is calling everyone involved far right. What on earth that means, we don't know. I mean, we are facing the most complex situation in the criminal justice process that I can ever remember. And as Stephen says, there are many people, especially within the Jewish community, who feel that they are being left out and are truly, truly aggrieved when they see others, receiving long sentences for lesser offending than is applying. So it's unbelievably complex at the moment and difficult to see how it can be resolved.